Do you think Elon Musk is rich? Well, he is. But if you compare Elon's wealth to the people in this video, then it's hard to say who's actually richer. There was a man so rich, he went on a pilgrimage and scattered gold along the roads, causing Egypt to suffer 10 years of inflation. Another was so rich they poured molten gold into his mouth after he died, because he foolishly went to war with ancient Iranians. And there was one even richer than the entire GDP of the world, simply because he was emperor and the world belonged to him. Yes, today we will meet 10 individuals who were once the richest in human history. People so wealthy that if they lived today, every time they sneezed, they'd crash the stock market. Buckle up, let's begin.
Mansa Musa, 1280 to 1337, the king who caused global inflation because there was too much gold. Mansa Musa was the 10th emperor of the Mali Empire, one of the most powerful dynasties in medieval West Africa. Under his reign, Mali became a center of trade, scholarship, and religion, famous for cities like Timbuktu and Gao. How did he get rich? The Mali Empire during Mansa Musa's reign owned the largest gold mines in the world. At that time, over half of the world's circulating gold came from West Africa, and nearly all of it was under his control. He taxed every trade activity crossing the Sahara Desert: salt, ivory, textiles, spices, and especially slaves, and on gold. He also accumulated wealth by controlling transcontinental trade routes connecting Africa to the Middle East and Europe. The legendary story. In 1324, Mansa Musa made a pilgrimage to Mecca, a journey spanning thousands of kilometers. He brought along 60,000 escorts, including hundreds of slaves, attendants, soldiers, and court officials. There were also 100 camels, each carrying over 100 kilograms of gold. Along the way, he gave away gold to the people, built mosques, supported the poor, and caused inflation across Egypt and the Middle East. The value of gold dropped drastically for many years, causing inflation that lasted over a decade, something completely unprecedented. Estimated wealth? Impossible to measure precisely. Some historians estimate that when converted, Mansa Musa could have had over $1,000 billion USD, or even been priceless, considering his financial influence.
2.
Augustus Caesar, 63 BC to 14 AD, the first emperor to control a quarter of the world's economy. Augustus Caesar, real name Gaius Octavius, was the heir of Julius Caesar and the first emperor of the Roman Empire. After defeating his enemies in the Civil War, he became princeps, the first citizen, unifying absolute power under himself. How did he get rich? Upon rising to power, Augustus controlled the entire Roman treasury, including taxes from over 70 million people, spoils of conquest, and resources from provinces like Egypt, Gaul, and Hispania. Once Cleopatra's personal empire, now became Augustus's personal property, not owned by the Senate or Rome officially. Also directly controlled the first professional army in Roman history, meaning both military force and wealth were in the hands of one man. Unmatched power. Augustus wasn't just wealthy, he was the symbol of stability after decades of civil war. With control over nearly the entire Mediterranean economy, he became the most powerful person in the world at the time. Estimated wealth. According to historians, he controlled 20 to 25% of the world's GDP at that time. When converted, Augustus's wealth could reach 4.6 trillion USD, the largest amount ever recorded for an individual.
3.
John D. Rockefeller, 1839 to 1937. The first American to become a billionaire thanks to oil and monopoly. Rockefeller was an American businessman, founder of Standard Oil in 1870. He became a symbol of American capitalism and was the figure who made the US government pass antitrust laws because he was too rich. How did he get rich? He controlled 90% of the US oil industry by the end of the 19th century, from extraction, refining, to transportation. Defensive competitions, he lowered prices until others went bankrupt, then bought their companies at cheap prices. After the government dissolved Standard Oil in 1911 into 34 smaller companies, the stock prices of those subsidiaries skyrocketed, making Rockefeller even richer. Historical legacy. He was the first person to own assets exceeding 1 billion USD, equivalent to around 340 to 400 billion USD in today's purchasing power. Though criticized for monopolizing oil industry, was also famous for massive philanthropy, founding the University of Chicago and funding healthcare and education. Estimated wealth, around 340 to 400 billion USD, equivalent to 2% of the US GDP at its peak.
4. Andrew Carnegie, 1835 to 1919, from poor immigrant boy to the Steel King of America. Carnegie was born in Scotland and immigrated to the US as a child. From a poor telegraph worker, he rose to become one of the greatest businessmen of the American industrial era. How did he get rich? Facilitates the Carnegie Steel Company, one of the largest industrial corporations in the world at the time. By applying modern steel production technology and strict cost management, he dominated the U.S. construction, railroad, and weapon industries. In 1901, he sold the company to J.P. Morgan for $480 million USD, around 15 billion US dollars today, becoming the largest business transaction in the world at that time. Legacy. And next to retirement, Carnegie devoted most of his fortune to building more than 2,500 public libraries, universities, research institutes, theaters, and scholarships. He booked the Gospel of Wealth, encouraging the rich to use their money to help society. Estimated wealth, around 310 to 350 billion USD, equivalent to 2 to 3% of the US GDP at the time.
5. Jakob Fugger, 1459 to 1525. The most powerful financial man of the Renaissance, Jakob Fugger, also known as Fugger the Rich, was a German banker, merchant, and financier. He led the Fugger family, the most powerful financial dynasty in Europe during the 15th through 16th centuries. How did he get rich? Fugger owned a banking network across Europe, lending money to kings, emperors, and popes. He invested heavily in copper and silver mines in Hungary and Tyrol, two of the largest precious metal sources in Europe. In 1519, Fugger financed Charles V so he could buy votes to become Holy Roman Emperor. In return, Fugger received financial monopolies and commercial privileges in many territories. Far-reaching impact. Fugger controlled nearly all of Europe's money flow during the Renaissance, influencing both religious reforms and geopolitical shifts. Schedule call him the most powerful figure in European history without a crown. Estimated wealth, around 400 to 500 billion US dollars, a number that many current billionaires are still far from reaching. 6. Emperor Taizu of Song, Zhao Kuangyin, 927 to 976. From general to emperor, controlling the largest economy in the world. Zhao Kuangyin was the founder of the Song dynasty, one of the most prosperous periods in Chinese history. Coming from a military background, he became the first emperor of the northern Song in the year 960 after a coup without bloodshed. How did he get rich? A model against defending the throne, he restructured the entire administrative, financial, and taxation systems, helping the imperial treasury stabilize and grow immensely. The taxes millions of farmers, controlled major trade routes, and especially promoted urban economy, as well as the technologies of paper, books, silk, and tea production. Under his reign, the Song dynasty began using paper money, the first fiat currency in human history, which accelerated trade and made taxation more efficient. How rich was he? Emperor, he controlled all national assets, including land, army, commercial taxes, and agricultural taxes. China at that time accounted for about 25 to 30% of the world's GDP, and most of that wealth was in the emperor's hands. Estimated wealth, estimated at 300 to 350 billion dollars USD if converted by global GDP ratio, possibly higher if including the value of land and the taxation system he controlled. 7. Akbar the Great, 1542 to 1605. The Mughal emperor who built the richest empire in the Indian subcontinent. Akbar was the third emperor of the Mughal Empire, a powerful Islamic dynasty that ruled most of the Indian subcontinent. Ascending the throne at just 13 years old, he quickly expanded the empire into one of the largest economies in the world. How did he get rich? Akbar reorganized the entire administrative system, implementing a fixed tax system that significantly increased national revenue. He controlled fertile lands in the Ganges Plain, mining areas in Rajasthan, and trade routes for silk, spices, and precious gems. Akbar traded with Persia, China, and the Ottoman Empire, turning the Mughal Empire into a global trade hub. How rich was he? Third, Mughal Empire under his reign made up about 20 to 24% of global GDP, comparable to Rome or Song China at their peak. Akbar directly controlled all imperial assets, including the army and taxation. Estimated wealth, around $200 to $250 billion USD, making him one of the richest and most powerful emperors in Asia. Marcus Crassus, a 115 to 53 BC. The greatest tycoon of Rome, the man who owned a city on fire. Marcus Crassus was a Roman general, politician, and investor, famously known as the richest man in the Roman Republic. He was one of the 3 men in the first triumvirate, alongside Julius Caesar and Pompey. How did he get rich? After the civil war between Sulla and Marius, Crassus bought up confiscated property at dirt-cheap prices, including houses, land, and slaves. Reactionary of Crassus's most infamous tricks was founding a private fire brigade of 500 slaves trained to put out fires. When a house caught fire, he wouldn't extinguish it immediately. Instead, Crassus negotiated with the panicked and desperate homeowner to buy the house at a bargain price. And only after the homeowner agreed to sell would his firemen act. Commemorate the result? He acquired many prime properties in Rome at extremely low prices, then rented them out or resold them for profit. He owned a gladiator training company and invested heavily in real estate throughout Rome. Not did he use slaves for basic labor, but Crassus also bought and trained skilled slaves, architects, builders, silversmiths, scribes. He used them in his construction projects or rented them out at high prices, similar to an ancient version of outsourcing. How rich was he? It's estimated that Crassus owned over 25% of all real estate in Rome. After crushing the Spartacus revolt, he became a legend, but his death at the Battle of Carrhae during the Parthian campaign became a grand tragedy, along with the infamous tale of molten gold being poured into his mouth. Estimated wealth estimated at 170 to 200 billion USD, far exceeding most modern entrepreneurs. 9. Nicholas II, 1868 to 1918. The last Tsar of Russia, a king with immense wealth who lost everything. Nicholas II was the last Tsar of the Russian Empire, ruling from 1894 to 1917. His reign was a period of strong industrial development, but also full of political instability. Where did his wealth come from? Tsar controlled all national assets: land, mines, the national bank, the army, and even the former serfdom system. In Waste's addition to state assets, he owned the largest gold reserves in Europe around the year 1900, diamonds, antiques, and vast royal treasures, including the famous Orlov diamond and many Fabergé eggs, handcrafted jeweled Easter eggs, each worth millions of US dollars, now priceless treasures in museums and private collections. A tragic ending. In 1917, the October Revolution broke out and he was overthrown and imprisoned along with his entire family. In 1918, Nicholas II and his family were executed in Yekaterinburg, ending the Romanov dynasty that had lasted for centuries. Estimated wealth. According to many modern estimates, Nicholas II's total wealth at the time of his reign could reach up to 300 billion US dollars when adjusted to today's value, though most of it was confiscated or disappeared after the revolution. This was a combination of personal wealth and sovereign wealth, because under an absolute monarchy, there was no clear boundary between state property and the king's property. Number 10. William the Conqueror, 1028 to 1087. The man who conquered England and owned the whole thing. William was the Duke of Normandy, now part of France, and after the 1066 invasion, he became the King of England, known as William the Conqueror. Where did his wealth come from? After winning the Battle of Hastings, he confiscated all the land of the Anglo-Saxon nobility and redistributed it to his loyal followers. In principle, all of it belonged to him. In 1085, William ordered the compilation of the Doomsday Book, a nationwide property survey. 3 documents recorded in detail who owned how much land, how many peasants, livestock, horses, mills, how much tax could be collected. This was the first modern land and tax management system in Europe, allowing William to tightly control the entire economy. How rich was he? He managed taxes, crops, natural resources, creating a wealthy and powerful feudal system. Its assets were not just market value, but represented absolute economic power. Estimated wealth, estimated at around 200 to 230 billion US dollar, not to mention his political, military power and influence on European history. These were 10 individuals who were once the richest in history. If you want to hear more fascinating facts, leave a comment below.